Okay, in this video we're going to be learning about how we can consume a REST service from C#. So taking an agile approach, we've got a user story format here. As a developer, that's me or you, I want to call a RESTful API from my C# application. That's what and why are we doing it? So that we can consume the resources it provides. Okay, and the ingredients, well, Windows PC to run Visual Studio. Visual Studio, obviously, internet access, possibly not mandatory, and then 30 to 40 minutes of your time. Now, you could be pedantic and say you don't actually need a Windows PC to run .NET code, but for the purposes of this video, we will be using such a PC. Right, so I'm just going to show you the web service, the RESTful web service that I've put on online for you to use as part of this tutorial. If you go to the blog, it has the URL there for you to use. Now there's two potential actions that we can work with, index and show. There are others, create, update and destroy, that I've disabled for the purposes of this video. We're just going to consume it. And you can see here we're returning a JSON string. JSON is JavaScript object notation. This video won't go into too much detail about it. You're probably familiar with what it is if you're looking at this video. It's basically just a structured way to return data effectively. I'm just showing you here that the web service can actually return HTML as well, but we will just be working with the JSON. Now I'm just copying the output from the web service into this online tool. It's really good, JSON editor online. Just paste your JSON in, click the button here, and that kind of formats it for you. It will tell you if there's irregularities with it and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool, and then you can sort of put it over to the right hand plane where it gives you a nice hierarchical view. Now I find this tool really useful when I'm consuming JSON. So what you can see on the screen here is basically the client mocked up in a tool called Balsamiq, although there's a lot of really great tools out there that you can use to do something similar. And you can see there's two text boxes, one where we're going to put the URL of our web service that you saw a bit earlier on. We're just going to put that in there. There's another text box which is basically going to show us the return from the web service. Now, again, it's fairly basic, very basic user interface, but again, mocking up just helps me think about how it's going to flow and how it's going to work. And you can just see that the two steps of once you click the button, the go button, the data is returned. And here's what it will look like in Visual Studio when you actually come to creating the project. You can probably just skip straight to that stage. Wireframing is probably a bit over the top, but again, I've just included it as part of the process. Alright, so let's get on and start creating our new project. As you can see, that I'm using Visual Studio Community Edition 2015. Now I've found this to be a great tool with no real, I've not come across anything yet that I need that is not in this version of the tool. It's really good. So we are going to Visual C Sharp Windows Form Application Project. Just give it a name. We'll call it something like REST Client, although from memory I think I've already got a project called that, so let's just call it something like, just give it a slightly different name, C# REST Client. Just to avoid any duplication, we'll just wait for the project to set itself up. I'm actually running, this is actually a Windows virtual machine running on an Apple Mac. My goodness. I just do all the video editing on a Mac, and it just makes a bit more sense to do the screen recording on a Mac. Anyway, that's a bit of a digression. So here's your Windows form. You're probably pretty familiar with this. So we're just going to get the environment set up. Just change the form heading. You can probably fast forward a wee bit if this is all just kind of really boring to you. And then what we're basically going to do is we're going to take our mocks, basically take our wireframes, not our mocks. There's a difference I've recently sort of found out. We'll take our wireframes, make reference to them, and we'll just basically start building up our form. So there's a text box for the URL for our web service that we will be calling. I again, this is just kind of hygiene type stuff. I like to give my text boxes sort of meaningful names. You probably have your own methodology. I usually prefix mine with txt using kind of camel case. Okay, and then we're just going to add our second text box that we'll use for our response back from the RESTful API. And we're going to make this, we'll give it a name first, text response, probably a good name as any. And then we're going to make it multi-line because the responses potentially could be quite big, so multi-line equals true, and then we'll just set some scroll bars. We'll just set the vertical ones so we can scroll up and down. Pull that down a bit, and then what we'll probably do is anchor it to the form. So when, I mean, again, you probably know all this stuff. Probably if you're looking at this video, you know all this already. But yeah, that just basically anchors it to the form. So when we resize the window, you can see what's there. We'll add a button to it. Go, exclamation mark, very exciting. And again, I'll just rename that. Again, I prefix all my buttons with CMD, which is a command. I don't know where I picked it up from. Possibly Visual Basic days or something like that. It's kind of funny how that kind of thing sticks with you, isn't it? And we'll put a couple of labels on just to keep it in tune or in line with our wireframe. I very rarely, if ever, give my labels names, unless of course they're going to change. But if they're static and they don't change, then I never actually rename them. I don't know if that's good or bad. It's never really caused me any problems, so I'll probably just stick with that approach. Alright, so our UI, our very complex UI is basically done. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just add another class to our project, and this class is actually going to be our REST client class that you'll be able to reuse again in other projects. A little bit further in the video, so yeah, just pick class, give it a name, REST client probably. A little bit further along in the video, when we come to populating the constructor and the single method of the class, you'll see a little class diagram that I prepared for that. So there you go, REST client class, ready to go. Now, this is just a bit of an aside, and again, you can probably fast forward a bit. Again, of course, double clicking on your command button will create the event handler, the command click event handler for your button, and you can see it down there as well. Again, you probably know all this stuff. What I'm just going to do here, firstly, I like to put some regions in. Even for really small projects, I like regions. They basically are just kind of areas of code that you can group together, and then you can kind of expand and collapse them. It just keeps the code, for my purposes anyway, it just makes it a bit more readable. You can kind of get rid of stuff that aren't used that much. So there's our UI event handler region. And so yeah, what I'm just going to do here, again, you can probably fast forward it if you're not too interested. I have a function that I reuse all the time, and basically all it does is it just writes out strings to a text box, a multi-line text box. There it is, called debug output. It takes a string as some input. Now it writes out the input string to your output window in Visual Studio, and yeah, output window there, and it will also write it out to our text response box here, and it will scroll down the more stuff you put in it. And I just find it a really useful function. Yes, Visual Studio's got some fantastic inbuilt debugging features, but I find this is just a really quick way to kind of help me understand what's happening in the code. So feel free to use that. We'll just test it out. We'll put something in here, and you'll see, yeah, it's probably easier to show you an example of what I mean by what it's going to do. It's very basic actually, but I just find I use it all the time, especially when I'm starting off with smaller projects. And we will actually use it when we get our JSON response back from our REST API web service. So let's just give it a try. Get rid of these windows here. Get our output window ready, and then we'll just click the go button. I don't know what I did there, and then yeah, you'll see what it does. Okay, yep. So it just writes out a string and scrolls down. the text box. The output window scrolls automatically. And that's it. Okay, as promised, here's a couple of diagrams for you. First, a sequence diagram. Very simple, couldn't really get much more simple. Our REST client, C# on the left there, making a HTTP GET request to our user's resource or RESTful web service and getting a JSON response back. Now in effect, that's all this application is doing, is making a HTTP request. Sorry to ruin the magic for you. And here's our class diagram, our REST client class with two methods, a constructor, very simple, and a make request method, which is where everything is basically going to happen. And we have a small enumeration that lists the verbs that our class could potentially use. We're only using get in this instance. Okay, back to our REST client class, and I'm just kind of tidying up the headers here. We need 4. System, IO, net, and I thought we needed text. We don't actually need that, so that's actually somewhat redundant. You'll see in a minute, it's quite cool, this version of Visual Studio. It kind of color codes the using statements depending on whether they're used or not. Just paste in our enumeration, our list of HTTP verbs. Again, we're only actually using get in this tutorial, so it is a bit redundant. Okay, so just before we start coding, a little bit about the HTTP web request class, a bit of a mouthful. Now it basically inherits, as you can see there, from the web request class. And we actually use the web request class constructor to create a HTTP web request class. My goodness, it's quite a mouthful. Now, if you actually search for this documentation online, it will take you to the right page. I just searched for C# HTTP web request, and if you just read the remarks, it basically just tells you how you should use it and why you should use the web request constructor, so on and so forth. And it also details the get response method there, I'm just highlighting, and how you use that, and then how you get a response stream, and then you read that. Yeah, so it explains it better than I can. All the documentation's there. So now if we jump over to the code, everything should become clear. So originally I was just going to paste all the code in, and I actually made a video where I did that. I just pasted the code in from a notepad that I have to the left of the screen, but I thought that's totally pointless. You've come here to see and have an explanation on how all this stuff works, so just pasting code in is pretty much redundant. So you're going to have to put up with my slow typing, but I feel it's more valuable that we do it this way. So the first thing we're going to do is create our two properties, class properties. The endpoint, that's just going to hold our URI. And then the second property we're going to have is the HTTP verb that we created above, the enumeration. Now, again, for the purposes of this demo, it's a little bit over the top, a little bit redundant, but maybe going forward, let's replace that. Going forward, it's probably a good thing to have if you expand upon the class. Right, so what we're going to do now, yeah, we're going to actually do the constructor, so REST client, there we go. And all we're going to do is just initiate or instantiate the two properties. I'm going to set the endpoint just an empty string. We'll set that later when we actually create an object. And yes, we're just going to set the verb to get by default, as that is all we will be doing as part of this demo. And then finally, the moment you've been waiting for, we are just going to make the make request method. And this is where all the magic happens. We're going to return back a string. I just like to sort of create the string right at the start and then just kind of return it back at the end, and then just do a quick build to make sure everything is sort of wired up at a very high level. Just make an empty string. We'll just return it back. There we go, build, yep, succeeded, so everything's no syntax errors. The great thing about Visual Studio is you'll know immediately if you do have something wrong. It's fantastic. I mean, I did a bit of Rails programming a while back, and you get none of this kind of stuff, or not that I could find anyway. Anyway, so we're going to make, as I said just in the intro, a HTTP web request object. We'll call it request. And I'll just show you trying to create this is the redundant constructor, create a web request. Just show you the methods here. Just show, yeah. This is new HTTP web request create, and then we'll just put in the endpoint. Now that shouldn't work because you can see it's been, as it said in the documentation, it's been what's the word? I can't remember the word. Discontinued. It's not discontinued. Retired, made redundant. So as it says in the documentation, basically what we have to do is we have to effectively cast it using the web request object, and that should work now. Now I did actually try just using the web request object, and it actually does work. So I think the HTTP request object, as it says in the documentation, just provides a HTTP specific implementation of this. So it's probably best to use that. Okay, so as part of the setting up, we're just setting the request object's method to get. Again, this is where our verb enumeration comes in up above. It's a bit over the top, but we're just setting it there. Okay. So what we're attempting to do now is get the response back, HTTP web response. And that's using the get response method, which is a synchronous request to the server. There we go, get response. Okay, so that just passes back a response. It's not actually passing back the data, it's just basically getting a, was it successful, was it not successful? And if it's successful, then we will get a response stream, which is basically the stuff that we want to return back. Okay, cool, build is okay. Passing back a HTTP web response object. So just a status code check to see what the synchronous response back from the server was. If it isn't okay, you get a list of options there in the status code, then we'll just throw an error or throw an application exception. Okay, and just give a horribly generic response back, some that request, I don't know, error code. I mean, if you know the error codes, it's probably relatively meaningful, but just put that in. Turn it to string. There we go. Okay, so basically what we've done so far, we have created a request object, which is a HTTP web request. We're then making a get response request method, passing back a HTTP response object, and we're checking the status. And now we're going to, assuming it all went well, process the response stream. And I say it could be JSON, could be XML, could be HTML. I mean, I'm expecting JSON in our next tutorial will go into parsing the JSON and using it, but it could be anything, and you'll see that when we actually run it. Okay. So we're just setting up a stream object, and we're calling get response stream. And this is actually bringing back a stream of data and putting it into the response stream. So we'll, I'll just put this in because I start to lose the plot a bit when I'm using these using statements, and same with if else's and all that kind of stuff. I just like to kind of demark which one is which. It helps me keep my sanity. Let's do a bit of housekeeping. Okay, so we're expecting a stream of data, but probably just check to see if there's anything there. So if a response stream isn't null, we've got some kind of data to pass back, then what we need to actually do is create a stream reader. To read the response stream. Okay, new stream reader, yeah, and pass it in the response stream. So as you can see, it's a little bit convoluted, but it does make sense if you follow the flow of the code. It's multiple steps in setting it up. Basically just making a HTTP web request. That is effectively it, and then getting the data back and reading the data. But it can trip you up if you've not done it before, and this is why I do these videos. So here's a string that we're going to pass back, and we're just going to basically, using the stream reader, we're just going to read to the end of the stream. And then we will eventually pass that string back. Okay, so let's build that. It's all looking pretty good. I don't think I've made any mistakes. Yep, I think that's looking pretty good. And just make sure this is indented correctly. Yep. All right. Okay, that's looking good. So we go back to our form code. I've cleared out the click event. We're just going to now create an object, a REST client object. We'll call it our client. There we go. Our constructor doesn't take any parameters, so we have to set them afterwards, as we're doing now. We'll just set the endpoint to whatever is in our text box. Okay. Using our debug output function, just say, REST client's created. Excuse me, my voice is going. And now the magic is happening. We'll just create a response string. I'm probably doing this a bit long-handed, but I like to just kind of set it up with an empty string, and then I'll set it to the, the make request response. And then we'll just, again, using debug output, we'll just see what we get back on the screen, or in our application. All right, built okay. So here's our test web service, or REST API, and we'll just make sure it's still all working. So we just want to return all the users from the user's resource. Call it the index method. This application is actually written on Ruby on Rails, which I was talking about before. It's pretty good, but it's good for rapid prototyping. So we'll just, anyway, digression, we'll just paste in the URL, and there we go. We're getting back the JSON response using our REST client class. And again, you can even just go in here and you can change this and reuse it. We can return back a specific resource with an ID of 2. And again, just to prove a point, we can just, doesn't have to be JSON, it can be HTML. It just gets a stream of data from a HTTP web request. Okay, that's about it, we're done. As I say, the MSDN resource on the HTTP web request class is really useful. I suggest you read that. Also, my blog up there has basically step-by-step instructions as shown in this video. So please go there, take a look, leave a comment. Any suggestions for improvement are more than welcome, as long as they're constructive. Next time, what we're going to do actually is work with the JSON response that we can get back from any RESTful web service, and work with that, deserialize it and parse it and do all sorts of stuff with that. It's a very very useful skill to have these days. So that will be next time. It will be on the blog, and it will be on the YouTube channel as well. So yep, the web address is been and gone, and I'm also on, well, YouTube obviously, and Twitter. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.